know that trick. Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is our last seminar of the 2026 Spring Seminar Series. And it is my real pleasure to introduce Dr. Mike Boehm. Probably you don't know, but Dr. Boehm was my instructor back in the days, about 2 decades ago, interplant pathology, great class, and a great professor. So thanks for accepting the invitation to come. Dr. Boehm is currently a professor of plant pathology at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, past president and fellow of APS, and the recipient of APS Excellence in Teaching Award, which, speaking as a former student, is well, no surprise, right? So beyond the classroom, and I think I learned this very early on in your career, so you were involved in some interesting projects with the Navy. And so this perhaps is connected to some of the leadership ideas that you might be discussing today. He has been working at the interface of science and national level decision making. Just last year, and so this is another personal touch here. So we had a great conversation during the annual APS meeting. We were brainstorming a couple of ideas on what to do with some of the current opportunities in science and things connected, especially with AI and many other tools. And so, long story short, we ended up recruiting Dr. Boehm as a great partner to put together a USDA SAS proposal. We submitted, and we're still waiting for that. And so,
you got a slide.
There you go. Last thing, so if you had a chance to read the pre-read piece, I did it this morning, and so there were some words that I'm pretty sure that you're going to be covering today during the seminar. So leadership, identity. This is talking to students, next generation leaders, and of course, times and uncertainty. So I definitely am looking forward to hear Dr. Boehm, and without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Boehm.
Well, thanks. It's really a pleasure to be here. I've been on the campus a couple of times, mostly over at the turf farm, if you will. And so I've seen it from that angle. And we have a niece and I don't know what you call your son-in-law, nephew. They live in Lafayette, so they have two little kids. So that was nice to see them. And we've been through, but I haven't spent much time on campus. And it's just a really neat campus. I walked the campus last night. I got caught in that rainstorm. That was some lightning. So yeah, it's very much a pleasure to be here. And I would say Christian didn't talk too much about this, but I have pivoted up back to the faculty in June of last year after a long stint of administrative roles. While I was at Ohio State, I was able to keep my lab together. But when I moved to Nebraska, it's too big of a job in a new ecosystem, and I had to put the science back. But I didn't lose my curiosity, and I had a lot of fun getting to hear about science from all across agriculture and natural resources. The talk today really has two acts, if you will. The first act is talking about a little bit about Nebraska. I couldn't come and visit without a little bit of that. But talking about the changing dynamics that we're seeing at systems level. And I'm going to pull from my bioecology and biological control course a little bit. So I'll pull in some of those slides, big topics about how science and policy collide and that intersection, and how we advocate and how we really take discovery and move it into decision making. So that's Act 1. Act 2 was all about thinking and focusing on early career and mid-career professionals, and thinking about some of the opportunities and challenges that many of you in this room, I'd say all of us in this room, are facing. And so those are the two acts for the talk. The pre-read was nothing more than just some reflections. And I want to thank Christian for the invitation. And the pre-read was just a way for me to get some ideas that have been kind of colliding in my mind for the last couple of months on paper. So with that, I'm not going to stand behind the podium the whole time, but Nebraska, it's not far away. Just go up 52 or 65 to I-80, hang a left, and you'll be in Lincoln. And I don't know, 7, 8, 9 hours, depending on how fast you drive. It's a pretty neat state. I grew up in Ohio. 21 years I was on the faculty at Ohio State. I crudely put it in from over in Wyoming, which would be the far side, Colorado. There is elevation. I learned very quickly if you ride bikes, you want to start by the Wyoming Nebraska border because it's about a 4,500 foot drop by the time you get to the Missouri River. Interestingly, like Indiana, my wife's from Bluffton, Indiana, so I'm a little familiar with the east side of the state. Really interesting differences in the agroecology. Thinking about landscapes, both natural landscapes like the sandhills, but also working agricultural landscapes. It's a pretty neat place, and I won't dwell on that. But like most places, it's the people that make the place special. And some of these folks you might pick out. It's interesting to see who is from Nebraska. I think even Larry the Cable Guy, he shows up every once in a while. But what is most exciting to me are those who haven't yet made their mark. And that's where the hope and the promise for the future. And I had lunch with the grad students today, and we had a nice chat, and it was all about the future, right? You will be leading our science, our disciplines. You'll be leading these land-grant universities. You'll be making impacts to the future of society, and it's really pretty key. So let's get on with it then. So the land-grant university is something that's near and dear to me. I'm not going to give a lesson on the Morrill Act or the Hatch Act or the Smith-Lever Act, but high level, this Morrill Act came into being. It had been discussed prior to the Civil War, but it came to be in 1862 at the peak of the Civil War in this country that Abraham Lincoln signed the Morrill Act into being, which essentially created space for these public land-grant universities that moved science ultimately into practice. And that is pretty special, and I see a lot of folks from all over the world. Everywhere I've traveled, some 34 countries, there is a tight connection to the land-grant spirit. I'd also say that land-grant spirit has perhaps evolved from the time of Justin Morrill and Abraham Lincoln to include our community colleges, our technical colleges, our state colleges. Our public higher ed system is pretty incredible here in the U.S. And when you think about it, whatever words you use, oftentimes we use teaching and research. It depends where you're at on campus, usually in colleges of ag and life science or natural resources. We talk about extension and we talk about service. Extension and service, in my mind, are different, but in other parts of campus, really it's teaching, research, and service. I tend to use phrases like teaching and learning, research and discovery, and then extension and engagement. Sometimes you'll see outreach and engagement, but the three-part mission. Pretty simple idea, but in practice, here to tell you, it's hard to pull off. I'd say that we're very good at the Academy at discovery, less consistent at turning that discovery into action. And it's not, I will say, for a lack of will or desire. It's a complex ecosystem that we're navigating. Brian and I were talking a little bit, maybe we're same vintage. He started here about the same time I started at Ohio State. It's complex. It's complex when you think about all of the different parts and pieces of Purdue. We'll use Purdue since we're on your campus. Different colleges, different ways of thinking about things, different political pressures, different stakeholder groups, all of that is coming into this milieu, this mix, and we have to navigate. We have to navigate that. I wouldn't be a plant pathologist if I didn't try to work in something close to a disease triangle. Discovery alone rarely drives action, and the impact that we are so interested in making, I would contend, depends on alignment. In the disease triangle model, of course, it's about the host, right? You have to have a susceptible host, you need a virulent pathogen, and you need a conducive environment. That's what we talk about. Interestingly, some recent manuscripts have talked about maybe changing out the word pathogen for biota as we think about things like the phytobiome, or right across the hallway is a microbiome lab, thinking broadly about all of the life in that system colliding. And then usually for plant pathologists, we hold the time and we add that to the triangle and we get a pyramid, and we call it the disease pyramid. And we talk about that a lot in ecology, in epidemiology. But if we take and think about the interactions that have to happen between stakeholders, so whether those are internal to the academy or external, public, government partners, bless you, incentives. I'm going to talk a lot about incentives in Act 2 of the talk. Policy decisions. Those policy decisions in Washington, D.C., down at the State House here in Indiana, or over in your admin building with your leadership, or perhaps even at the department or program level. All of that happening over time. So you can think about it. I don't know if the color shows up, but basic color wheel. I think it's appropriate that when you blend all of these colors together, sometimes it gets a little difficult to see what's happening. And yet it's this interaction, this overlap space that we're trying to make sense of. In reality, it's more like a Harry Potter disease triangle or a Harry Potter puzzle, where these, over time, the influence of stakeholders and policy and incentives, it's changing. And I said this to several folks, institutions, organizations that have some durability in leadership tend to have less change over here. But when this is changing rapidly, just human nature, it's a difficult thing for us to get our heads around. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. So this is a slide that I pulled from my my course that I co-teach with an entomologist, really thinking about balance, right? So if we have stakeholders and incentives and policy all colliding and changing over time, it's really thinking about this concept of balance. This is a model that Marty Dickman and Paul Figueredo put together that I really like, just thinking about plant disease and basically saying, look, if the conditions favor the host, the plant, you likely will have a healthy outcome. However, if it tips in favor of the pathogen, you'll likely have a disease outcome. And I think a lot of times our connotation is that disease means imbalance. I'm here to say I think it's a matter of perspective. From a pathogen's perspective, disease is highly ordered. It's not random chaos. Things are ordered, but they're just ordered in a way that the ecology tips to the favor of the pathogen. And I think this, when we think about moving discovery to decisions, I think the same kind of a balance analogy plays out here. I think the other thing about this that I want to drive home is that outcomes are really emergent from the system. So if you're mixing and matching stakeholders and policy and incentives over time, it really is, the outcomes are emerging. Not much luck have I had in my career going into a system and saying it's got to be ordered this way and this way and this way, and that you're able to pull that off. I've had some examples where it worked. Like I thought I was going to come in in a class and have a class session one day, and guess what? It worked. Everybody got what I was trying to say. There are other days I've walked into the classroom and we've gone, 180 degrees differently. When you're thinking about moving science to actual action or knowledge to action, it's a little more tricky than that. So I think if we think about we're biologists, so think about the biological systems that we're operating in. You also see this taking place in institutional systems. So, for example, knowledge not equaling action. Structure does not mean alignment. Signals not leading to decisions. I think a lot in the biological control space that I work in, you could have the best antagonistic microbe on a petri dish in the laboratory. But when you take that organism and grow it and take it out to the field, oftentimes you don't see the efficacy, right? Even though you understand what the mechanism might be, it doesn't translate as you anticipated. I talked about convergence in the white paper, and as a student, as somebody who's passionate about land-grant universities, and Purdue is just an excellent model, and Brian and I were talking about this. The world's getting more complicated. When we think about the systems, maybe at some point, although I really don't know if I believe this, perhaps it was more straightforward in some of the systems that we're working in, how you manage a field, how you manipulate or engage with practices that lead to high throughput yield. Our system is blending these very complex systems, social systems, the human dimension. Somebody this morning, we were at breakfast and the server was going to be a student. We asked her, well, what are you interested in? She said, I'm interested in business or psychology. And we got onto the psychology kick and basically said the human dimension influences everything that we do, even if you don't think it is that way. And anyone in this room that deals with stakeholders or extension or outreach or with students, with learners, there's a human dimension that's there to play. But thinking about land-grant universities, even if you're in the College of Agriculture, thinking about food, well, we also think about fuel, we think about fiber, we think about circular economies, we think about rural prosperity, we do think about yield, yes, we think about plant health, but we think more and more food and water security is national security. We think about global security. We think about what's happening in the world right now. For example, in the Ukraine-Russia war, how that has changed dynamics with the flow of wheat out of the bread basket, right? We think about what's happening right now in Iran and in Gaza. I mean, these are global events that absolutely shape what we do and influence a lot of decision making around our discoveries. Sometimes you might have to go a little bit to figure out how they're connected, but also thinking about data analytics and AI and machine learning, engineering, the humanities and the arts, the linkage even between what it means to be human, and a lot of discussion with AI, right? And how that is or isn't changing workforce dynamics. It's pretty complicated, and I would contend that land-grant universities that were created way back when are perfectly positioned to deal with this complexity and these dynamics. I think one of the tricky things for those of us in colleges of agriculture and life sciences or ag and natural resources is that all too often our blinders are on, and somehow because we've been doing this for a while, we are the part of the university that is the land grant part of the university. And I'm here to say that all of Purdue University, all of the University of Nebraska, all of Ohio State, Michigan State are land grant universities. And we have to try to figure ways out to pull colleagues in or provide access or partner in ways that maybe we haven't done. And that gets to some of the structural impediments of how we're organized, how money flows, how incentives work when it comes to resource allocation. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. So from knowledge to action, right? The challenge isn't so much about generating knowledge. It's not about getting the knowledge. It's about aligning systems so that that knowledge can be used. So this idea of alignment is really, really, really key. Again, I don't know, maybe a show of hands, how many of you are engaged with extension outreach one way or the other? Yeah, we have lots of information that we take to producers. Is that fair? Our adoption rates are through the roof. They're quick. No, I'm making that. I think in my area, adoption rates are lagging. I think about things like groundwater quality in Nebraska due to over-fertilization of corn crops where our aquifers are lit up with nitrates. We know how to raise corn with a more moderate use of nitrogen fertilizer, but talk to the farmer when she goes into her ag lender, and the ag lender is saying the incentive is I need you to maximize yield. It gets complicated really fast, I guess is my point on this. Adoption and alignment of systems. So this is, I don't know if this is going to make any sense today. That's not the one. Oh, there it is. So sorry for jumping around. That was what I was doing in the office, and I should have erased that first one. We'll get to this in a second then. Sorry, my apologies. So I want to pivot then to think about Act 2, which is really about the continuum of learners and the continuum of leaders. I personally believe that every single one of us in this room, I don't care what role we play, is a learner. And I believe everyone in this room is also absolutely a leader, one way or another. In thinking about the classroom and thinking about helping folks learn, this graphic down here going from early childhood, so that little 4-H'er showing her sheep, right? Thinking about early childhood engagement and how important that is. Thinking about as you move through elementary school, then you get to high school, say 8th grade, 9th grade, to about second year in college. That is really a blurry time. It used to be, again, when I was growing up, it was pretty separate. Now that's a very blurry space where learners are being exposed. Like, I didn't know that there even was a field called plant pathology until I was a senior in college looking for graduate school and reading posters on the wall, because that's the way. There was no internet back then, and you had to learn. But now learners are being exposed in so many ways to some pretty cool access paths. We have really cool programs in our expanded learning where you might be able, as a 9th grader, 10th grader in high school, to get a certificate in a discipline. Maybe not for credit, but it's a teaser. You might do that through 4-H or FFA, or you might do it through an urban high school. You have the opportunity to start your college career sooner. I don't know. Students are coming to the university with a year or two of college under their belt. Most of those students aren't interested in getting through in 3 years. They're interested in using their 4-year college experience to round it out with internships, externships. Maybe they take and do a study abroad before they even start. So these broadening experiences is what we've been seeing. But this is a pretty neat opportunity. And then thinking about my comment from Justin Morrill and Abraham Lincoln about these land-grant universities, and even thinking about the, I'll call it academic snobbery, for lack of a better frame. We have it all the time, and our universities kind of live and die by their reputation, and I certainly understand that. But truth be told, a 4-year college degree perhaps isn't for everyone. So technical schools, trade schools are excellent opportunities for access. to amazing careers, but also opportunities to figure your life out, figure your interests out. Perhaps there are personal reasons for needing to stay closer to home. They provide access points and blurring those lines. And yet, as I'll say here in a moment or two, there are folks that would like to pit 2-year schools and 2-year programs against 4-year programs. I mean, to me, that just kind of defeats the purpose, right? Everybody deserves a path. Everybody should have an individualized path to learning. And if it makes sense to take one path or another, or to combine the two, those paths should be there, and we should celebrate and keep our focus on learner success. End of story. Thinking about grad and professional programs, which many of you are engaged in here, and then thinking about lifelong learners and this whole conversation that we're having. And it's not just higher education. Institutions are under attack, and people are questioning the value proposition. It is a real discussion in higher education, and every poll that I've seen, that the public, for whatever reason you want to fill in, has the lowest, as a public, the lowest sense of the importance of post-high school education, which pains me as an educator greatly. But that's part of the context that's changing. That's part of that Harry Potter model, that's part of what we're navigating. So thinking about then you in this room, us in this room, we fall into crudely early career, mid-career, and senior career folks. You could put yourself wherever you want, using any criteria. But I would say, as a system, again, we're all in this together, and trying to figure out how collectively we think about the world, the rules, the policies that we operate. And that's when we'll get over to Chutes and Ladders and Catan here in a minute. But early career folks are learning the systems. They're learning the rules. They're trying to navigate those. They're trying to get through promotion and tenure, right? It is what it is. PhD students are taking candidacy exams. I know several of you are either at that point or you're ready to launch, right? So wherever you're at, there's a series of steps, but you're busy learning the systems, acclimating to systems. Mid-career are really about navigating these systems. And I'll talk about this more. Senior folks are really, in my hope, really about stewarding the system. And again, I'll get to it on the next slide. But thinking about where this happens, so our 2 land-grant universities are listed here. Wonderful place to navigate these steps. There are formal leadership programs. Lead 21 is a program primarily for university and industry faculty who are engaged in agriculture or food systems. Typically, those folks are curious about leadership, or they're curious about learning about their own leadership. Most of us, again, probably didn't have a lot of, at least I'll speak for myself, I didn't have a lot of how do you teach effectively, how do learners learn. That just wasn't part of my curriculum. I didn't, in my civilian world, go through leadership training. 21 years in the military, Army Reserve for 10, and 11 years in the Navy Reserve. I had a lot of expectations placed on me about being a leader, and the military was an excellent place to learn about myself as a leader. And all of us have strengths, and all of us have areas that we're working on. And as leaders, we shine a bright light, but we also, when the sun is positioned correctly, cast a shadow. And we have to be aware that where that shadow is cast. And I boil it down, those who work with real-time PCR, you're thinking about primers and probes and so forth and so on. I think about emitters and quenchers. I like to surround myself with emitters, people who are happy and thoughtful and reflective and kind. But you all you all know an Eeyore in your life where the world is just rough and always gloomy. They take those folks, in my estimation, it's a lot of energy for me to be around them because it's constantly kind of a sucking sound into that vortex, and it's just tricky. But there are programs, Lead 21, FSLI, for those who are interested in perhaps moving from, say, a department chair or a center director into quote unquote more senior dean job, associate dean. And then not underestimating our professional scientific societies. These are fantastic places, less from an institutional perspective and more from a disciplinary home base. So thinking about the plant science, the botanists in the room, thinking about the plant microbe interaction, the plant pathologists in the room, the weed scientists. I should have put a Weed Science Society up here, but these are places where every single one of us can engage. And you get to learn from your peers at other institutions. And it's a pretty neat place to express your leadership gene. And I would encourage every graduate student in here to engage as appropriately, not just giving a poster or a talk, but get involved in the committee structure. These societies are run by members. They're volunteers. We're volunteers. Pretty important. Now, I'll also say, I'm not naive, that at each stage of your career, you have to be a bit mindful, and that's what mentoring is all about, and mentoring committees and so forth, about how engaged should you be, because there's expectations that you're also progressing in your degree program or in your career progression. So it's not just free reign, go be a leader and not pay attention to what you need to do, but there are opportunities to do both, I guess, simultaneously or in parallel. So again, kind of what does this mean for us as leaders and as scientists? Scientific training alone, I would say, is not sufficient. We really need to be thinking about what are the systems that we're operating in. We need to understand what the incentives are. This is really tricky sometimes, and we'll talk about that. And then engaging across boundaries. Get out of our comfort zone. Like if you don't know where the department, I don't know, if you don't know where College of Engineering AI folks are hanging out, you might want to, and that's an area that you're working in, you might want to find that building and go see them and poke your head in there. I guarantee you they'll be surprised when a plant person shows up and, you know, a medical lab saying, hey, I work on this and you work on that. You know what? They share type 3 secretion systems. There's a lot to be learned, and I would encourage you to do that. So we train for discovery, but impact really requires something more as that take home. Okay, so how do we win? How do we win? How do each of us succeed is a way to think about that. Playing on the early, mid, and senior, thinking about games. Our family likes to play games. And I'll start over there. What's this game?
Shoots and ladders.
Shoots and ladders. Yeah. Who said that? Good. Yeah. And how do you play this game? How do you win shoots and ladders?
I've actually never played shoots and ladders.
Okay. Anybody play shoots and ladders besides me? Yeah. How do you win shoots and ladders?
Don't you have to get to the top?
Right here, right there. Yeah. Yeah. So you start here at number 1 and you roll dice and you move your player. Oh, and if you're lucky enough to get a 4, you can actually climb the ladder to number 14. So that works pretty well. Well, goodness gracious, if you're over here and you land on whatever number 85, oh my goodness gracious, you're going back to 24. Not very strategic, but it's a game where whoever gets to this wins, and you have to navigate. You hope for ladders, but you often find the chutes. Okay, so that's this game. There's usually one winner. It's highly competitive, could be fun, but it gets frustrating, right? And I think if you're an early career person and this is your game, you're trying to figure out with the roll of a dice, how to avoid getting onto one of those chutes, that becomes kind of tricky. Your job, your thinking is, hey, I'm a new graduate student in this department. I'm not from this place. You're trying to understand the system. You're trying to master the game. You're competing and you're trying to produce. I'd say for faculty, early career faculty, boy, you can read the P&T manual about what is expected, right? Thankfully, there is a manual for that game. And oftentimes you'll hear, well, you're playing the game and there's a negative connotation. I hope to change that a little bit. When you're in your mid-career, so you've kind of figured out how to play the game, I say the captain, like Navy captain of the team, you've got a team. You're now aligning the team. You're thinking about talent. You're bringing in folks to help you move your program forward. You're coordinating. Maybe you're not at the bench as much, but you're serving as a mentor. You still are delivering, but it's kind of a team sport. This for me is the cool column. When you reach that point where you really become the architect. And so you get to shape the system. You get to make up the rules of the game. You get to lead your colleagues. It's about enabling. It's about long-term sustenance. Winning, right? Kind of think about mechanics, teams, and systems. And the whole point of this is, especially when you get here, can you leave the game better than when you were over here? That's my belief, that we have a responsibility, if you're lucky enough to get here, to change the game, to make sure it's fair and resilient so that those coming after you can navigate this. So how about pandemic? Anybody ever play this game? It's not a very fun game anymore after COVID, I will say that. I use this in my bioterrorism and biosecurity class. It's one of these games where everybody wins or everybody loses. There's no in between. Anybody ever gone to an escape room? I've never done an escape room. I'm with you. No, never done an escape room. How's an escape room work?
You have to use clues and then they lead you to other clues to try to get out together and you work as a team.
Yeah. So it's not just you in the room, right? Do you think you could get through an escape room in time? Because there's a time, right? You got to get out and you move from room to room they lock you in there. Now they make sure you're safe and all of that. But yeah, you're probably not getting through an escape room deal without working collaboratively. And you either get out or you get stuck. That's pandemic. So there are games with those kinds of rules. How about Wingspan or Catan? Anybody play these games? I see one person shaking their head. These games are interesting. This one our son likes and his fiance like to play a lot. I love it because I love birds. Both of these games, there is a winner, but along the way, when you win, oftentimes the other players are also getting something out of it. What do I mean by that? In this game, you get to pick cards of different birds, and the different birds have different, they play a different role in ecosystems. And so you get a card and it tells you, like, some birds lay a lot of eggs. Some birds eat, different types of food resources. Some birds have different nests, so forth and so on. So everybody's got these cards. Well, there are pink cards and brown cards. So like when my bird lays 3 eggs, your bird might lay 1 egg. So when I succeed, you succeed, but I get a little bit more juice in the squeeze, right? And vice versa. So it still is collaborative, but it isn't I win and you completely lose, like Chutes and Ladders. So why am I putting this here? And maybe this is a silly analogy, but I think the reality is that the systems that we're operating in especially for early and mid-career folks, you've got to figure out what the rules are and how the game is played. And I'm going to say absolutely in my role, my metaphor was I've spent a long time trying to remove the chutes, doing everything I can to put more ladders for my colleagues who are coming after me. And I just feel like if we spent more time doing that, the world would be a better place. And maybe that's naive, but as you think about where you're at and as a community of scholars and learners and leaders, how can we do this collectively? To the graduate students, your graduate student handbook, thinking about that, working in partnership with your faculty to think about what's working and what's not working. And places that talk about these kinds of things, it's not a cakewalk, it's not easy, there's rigor, it's hard work, but collectively as a community, how are you operating to make things better? And I think this starts at in a lab. It certainly works at a department level. It's scalable to a college, to the provost's office, to your president's office, to your board of trustees. It works in state and federal government, but you have to be engaged, I guess. And I won't labor that anymore. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, so all of this is driving home this idea that leadership is stewardship. Those are words that I used. Leadership is not a position, although people have positions. In fact, this morning at breakfast, somebody made a comment, wow, you went from a professor to being a vice president and vice chancellor. You really moved up. And I'm like, yeah, personally, on an org chart, that's how leaders are often projected. I think that pyramid, that leadership pyramid for me is just so broken. Take the peak of the triangle and pull it down and make it a diamond. And the leader sits at the bottom of the diamond, at the bottom of the organization. And in the academy, then the deans are sitting on top of the provost. The department heads and the center directors are sitting on top of the deans. And who sits on top of the deans, the departments and the center directors? The faculty, the staff, the students, and the people that we serve. That's, I think, the way it works. It's not that the faculty are trudging up the hill to the dean's office, which sometimes it feels that way, I get it, but it's a mindset change. It's about selfless leadership. The other thing I would say is that positions are temporary. They're really temporary. There's a great leader, a fellow named Colin Powell, General Colin Powell. He's since passed. Colin Powell was a 4-star Army general, was the chief of staff, and was the Secretary of State. There were some things that happened in his journey about making war at 9/11 that unfortunately I think were rough. But Colin Powell talked about, there's a great interview where when he was Secretary of State, he had his own 757. And he would fly all over the world being Secretary of State for the United States of America. And he would talk about, he didn't like to travel, to be honest with you, Alex. He would get on his plane. He'd be the last one on the plane. And he'd sit in his office and the steward would bring an ice cold Diet Coke. I guess he really liked Diet Cokes. And then he would listen to the engines one at a time, the whining of the engines starting. And to hear him tell the story, which I had the fortune of listening to this in Columbus, Ohio once, what was winding up was not so much the engine, it was that the entire staff on that plane was moving diplomacy of the United States forward in the world. And that was it. And then he lamented that he knew that this was all temporary and that privilege would vaporize when he was no longer Secretary of State. In fact, then he said how much he looks forward to commercial airlines and sitting in the middle seat. He was a big man, sitting in the middle seat and couldn't wait for the treat, the little bag of pretzels or peanuts, and a cup of your favorite soda. My point on this is that as leaders, be proud that you've reached some position, whether that's getting your PhD or getting a tenure track line or a faculty line or being a vice president, being a president or provost. I don't care what it is, but maintain the humility that is all temporary. And I think it goes back to, if you have that mindset, that selflessness as a leader, again, I really do believe that land-grant universities and society works better. Context really matters, folks. I'm not going to dive into this. I talked a little bit about this. It matters. I've already talked about the public debate that's shaping perceptions of higher education, all-time low. Federal and state funding pressures. I've said this almost to every audience. I feel it's hard. It's always been hard to generate funding for your programs. But for those of us who are writing grants, and the landscape is really tough right now. Really tough right now. What's happening in state houses all over the country? Doing away with tenure. The inversion of tenure track faculty lines to specialty track faculty lines with 1 or 2 or 3 year contracts. There's a lot going on right now that, honest to goodness, nobody alive has seen this stuff. So back to everybody's a leader and everybody's a learner. Yes, there are people that maybe have more repetitions in the leadership box, but the reality is we're all going through this together. Leadership churn. I told Brian at the University of Nebraska, I was in my role 9 years and I had 5 university presidents in 9 years. When you have that kind of churn, it's hard to get your footing. It really is hard. Very, very tricky stuff. So you can read the rest of that. This is the one, Prop Sentinel AI Twin. So this is the SAS proposal that I was invited to work with Christian on, and it's awesome. But I think even in the introduction, which is the point of this, the challenge is therefore not technological, but architectural. Wow, architectural. The system's in need of some adjustment. The absence of an integrated operational closed-loop biosurveillance system was what is missing, and that was what the proposal was about. You can take a look here. You see some of the same words: continuum of learners pipeline, some of the integration that I talked about here. So yeah, I'll leave it at that, and then I'll leave you with these last 2 slides. Right, at a time when higher education is often defined by what is loud or visible, our confidence comes from something quieter and more durable. The land-grant design, envisioned in Lincoln's era, built to integrate education, discovery, and engagement in support of the public good. And then I left you with these questions. They're not simple questions, or they're questions without simple answers. And maybe they're not the right ones, but I do think they are, personally, for this moment. How do we align scientific discovery with decision making in these increasingly complex systems? How do we distinguish between disruption that strengthens and disruption that erodes? It's not change for change's sake, right? Change isn't bad, change is difficult, but how do you distinguish that? And then how do we intentionally support the next generation of leaders who will inherit these systems? And I hope you're inheriting them in better shape than when we found them. So, tough seminar to put together. Thanks for your patience on this one. And thanks for the invitation. And I think we have a few minutes for questions.
Anybody has questions?
Or comments or anything I said that you want to?
Yes, I'll start here. So, because I know, and some of these things resonate to a few talks that I have attended from you. So, thinking about the next generation of leaders. Of course, times change and different generations, etc. But so what should the new generations be thinking about? Skills. I guess that so for your generation or mine, we tend to think about a set of skills, but then we have to get that and rethink.
That's where the
Considering on this
continuum of
situation,
learners comes in.
exactly. So what can you suggest or recommend?
Yeah, well, I have enough time trouble figuring out what I need to be doing, so I'm not going to be telling anybody to do anything. Maybe some thoughts on this one. Be malleable, be nimble, be flexible. I think some little cheats that I use, assume positive intent and remain curious with every interaction. And perhaps the ones that make the least amount of sense at face value, find a way to remain curious and give a little bit of grace, assuming positive intent. Now, I also love baseball, so 3 strikes and you're out in my book. But that's 3 strikes, not the first strike or the wild pitch. And then, every day you heard this at breakfast, I wake up and say, all right, first thing I want to make sure I do is do no harm. Second thing is I want to do as much good for as many people as possible. And usually at night before I fall asleep, I take mental stock of I'm not a big journaler, but that would be a good place to do this too. Okay, did I create issues for other people? What did I do that was, helpful? And then candidly, who do I need to apologize tomorrow? And then I wake up the next day grateful that I woke up first and that I have the opportunity to play whatever role I'm in. And then who do I need to seek out and say, hey, I wish I would have handled this, Christian, a little bit differently than the way, or that interaction didn't go, or I was so excited I cut you off, or whatever that is. And then wash, rinse, and repeat kind of every day. I think those are just little nuggets of wisdom, but yeah, being nimble, being curious, assuming positive intent, I think really goes a long way. And then, do your work. I guess I'd say that, roll up your sleeves and do your job, whatever that job is, because that's going to carry you, right? And then I was drilled into me and I drilled it into our kids, like you can only control yourself, right? And our son played baseball there, and our daughter played soccer at high levels. It's like you run on and off the field because you can control that. What happens out on the field, you can't control. You got a baseball game tonight, Josh. So, run out on the field, hustle off the field, lift your teammates up, and that's what you can control. Simple stuff, really. Hard, simple, but hard to actually, pull it all together.
Good question right there.
Yes, ma'am.
So I know I'm pretty early career, so
Yeah.
maybe I won't incorporate any of this advice until much later, but personally, how has your approach to stewardship shifted and as you moved into your more administrative role and then back into your faculty type role? Is there anything that you learned while doing more of your administrative duties that you now see as like big points that you need to focus on, like moving back into a faculty position and as like a teacher or mentor?
Yeah, what's your name? Sorry.
Oh, I'm Mackenzie.
Hi,
Mackenzie
Mackenzie.
Jones.
Yeah, it's great question. Yeah, the 20-something Mike looks a lot different than the 61-year-old Mike, right? I think the thing that I'm most grateful for whatever reason, I don't know, I'm a slow learner. I think at least some cases 3 or 4 times, sometimes 7 or 8 times I've had to hear or experienced things. But once I learned them or was exposed, I tried really hard to be intentional to keep them front of mind, because I try to learn from other people's mistakes so that I don't have to go through the hardship, because guess what? I know I'm going to make plenty of my own mistakes. So just being intentional about that. I think the lessons that I learned too, I'll give you this, on thinking about stepping into leadership roles that require you to modulate in my case, being a professor. You couldn't keep a research program as intense when you're being a department chair, right? Your job, candidly, is not to use the resources for your own program. They're to encourage and support everyone, students, staff, and faculty in the unit. So there's a fine line, but in order to be credible, you also have to publish, and you need to have graduate students and postdocs. So you have to find that balance. But I, in my career, watched really good leaders that stuck around too long. And for too long for me, that's 8 to 10 years in any of these leadership roles. Work like a dog for 8 to 10 years, give it your all, and then get out of the way and let the next generation. And if you've been a successful leader, you've changed the architecture of the game in ways to make the success opportunities and paths for those following you, better. So that was the first thing. The second thing that I learned was I've seen too many faculty who went on, and in the military, people who ascended to high rank, who forgot what it was that got them into the business in the first place. So it's the humility piece. Find a way. I tell this to every colleague. Find a way. If you go the faculty route, and you get into a leadership role, and there are some in this room and that I've met with here that are, when's the right time? And being asked and invited to take this leadership role or that leadership role. Two things. Don't take a leadership role if you feel in your gut that you're giving something up that you're not ready to. I'm going to take a tangent. Goodwill Industries. Anybody clean out their closet and take stuff to Goodwill? There are T-shirts that I have from college that are in my closet today or in my dresser. My wife touched them and took them to Goodwill. I'd be like, not my best self. There are things that I'm freely, like, I haven't worn a suit. This isn't really a suit. This is a jacket and a pair of pants. I haven't worn a suit for almost 9 months since I walked out of that vice president role. My closet has all my suits, all my ties. Okay, maybe I wore a suit to church twice. I haven't given them away yet, which I'm like, wondering why. There's a part of me, but don't throw anything in the Goodwill bag. So in your career, or whatever stage you're at, don't just get rid of stuff. If it's important to you, keep it. Keep it in your drawer, put it in the top of the closet, put it in the attic. Maybe when it's ready, when it's ready to jettison it. Moving into administration from the faculty, where I love to teach and engage learners and extension and research. Keep some part of your professorial life vibrant and alive. It might be a tiny little piece, and it might seem to everybody else who's watching, which I really don't care too much about, it's you. You're the one running the marathon. Keep a tiny piece of that alive and remember how you got here. Some friend told me once, keep a foot in both furrows, right? Why is that important? Because when the day comes, should that day come, that you desire to re-engage being a full-fledged card-carrying faculty member, I learned by watching people who did not do this, it's a terrible thing for the individual and for the community when an overpaid administrator rolls back into the faculty and they are not contributing to the lifeblood of the unit. It just doesn't go well. So I always tried to act whatever role I was in, that my colleagues were enthusiastic about Mike coming back and being part of that community. And there were things that I did that made that, like promotion and tenure letters for the whole college. I hand delivered promotion and tenure letters. That was so amazing. I would walk and visit with students and faculty. I'd visit their labs. That was kind of, what's the suit doing in your lab? Right? Just little things that over time people said, oh, okay. And I think that's really, really important. So thank you, Wendy. Yeah. It's time for you to go, right?
All right.
Thanks again for the invitation. Thanks, everybody. I'll stick around if you have questions.